Welcome to A Changed Life. This is a podcast about choosing differently, how you think, how you relate, and how you lead yourself. Here we focus on the inner shifts that create real momentum and open up what's possible next. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Ilyse, and I'm so glad you're here. This morning when I was leaving to go see a client, I ran into a friend of mine. He is a therapist. And we stopped and chatted for a few minutes, and he knows that I'm a coach and knows what I do, and he asked me about my work. And he seemed, I guess melancholy would be the word, maybe a little defeated energy. And he said something that I have thought about the rest of the day. What he said was, I'm not so sure how much longer I can continue to do this work. There is so much pain and suffering, and I just don't know how much longer I can do it. Maybe I've come to the end of the road. And we chatted about it for a little bit, because it's not the first time that I've heard that from a therapist, actually. And I've also heard that from clients. Like, I don't know how much longer I could do this, keep going and talking about it. And I don't know how much longer I can do that. So this episode today may be for you, and it may be for somebody in your life, but this is where we're starting. So this podcast exists because change is the thing everyone says that they want, and the thing almost everyone finds a reason or an excuse to delay and put off. And I don't think of that as weakness. I think of it as biology. And once you understand what's actually happening inside of you, everything shifts. So today, we're talking about the science of change, why it's genuinely hard to do, why familiar always wins, at least in the short run, and what you can actually do about this. And I'm going to use my own life as the entry point into this conversation, because that's the only truest way that I know how to do this. Because if I'm speaking about somebody else's experience, I can't be 100% sure that I grasped their experience. And I want you to think about that for a second. As much as we can sit across from each other as friends, as coach, client, therapist, client, as colleagues, as coworkers, as family members, there's only so much understanding that we're actually going to have, because each of us are having our own lived experience with our own memories and our own nervous system and our own way that we interpret life, right? So let's go back to my friend for a second, the therapist. What he was describing, that feeling of staying too long in the pain, is something that I've been thinking about for a long time, specifically in this healing and recovery space. There's a model of healing, therapy being the most traditional version of it, that's built around excavation, going back, going deeper, unpacking the past, and there is real value in that up to a point. You need to understand what happened. You need to understand what happened. You need to feel it. You need to also stop running from it. And that's what so many people spend their lifetime doing. But here's what the research actually shows us. Revisiting a painful memory over and over and over does not resolve it. It actually reinforces it. So every time you retell the story, every time you go back into the wound, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between remembering and reliving. It fires the same way, which means you're not processing the past, you're rehearsing it. And at some point, that stops being healing. And it starts to become a place that people live from. So that's what my therapist friend was actually expressing. His clients were living there in the pain, and he's starting to wonder if he was helping them stay there. That conversation is the lens for everything that I want to talk to you about today. And if you're in therapy now, you're not doing anything wrong. You're not screwing it up. You're not doing it wrong. I just ask, open yourself up to the conversation, because if you're new to therapy, you may not be ready for this, but it'll plant a little seed for later. And if you've been doing it for a while, you might really recognize yourself in this conversation today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on currently in my life. I'm selling my house. I've lived here for 17 years. My daughter grew up here. I know every single sound this house makes, every corner of light that comes in the afternoon, the way the kitchen feels at 6 o'clock in the morning before nobody else is awake. My body knows that house the way it knows my own hands, the way it knows my face. And I want something different now. And not because anything is wrong with this house, but because I want a next chapter. And that requires a different container. And I think of this house as, this is a container. It has held more than a decade, almost 2 decades of my lifetime. That's a pretty meaningful container. And what I noticed is that what I've been holding on to are 2 things at the same time. Genuine excitement and wonder about what's ahead, and something that feels a lot like grief. Like I'm standing at the edge of a part of me that's leaning forward and a part of me that is gripping the door frame at the very same time. And I caught myself thinking, if this house were by the water, I'd never leave. And I had to sit with that for a second, because what I was really saying was, I need a big reason to justify why I'm giving up this house. I needed to give myself a big reason. If only this house was by the water. Well, clearly it's not. Many people are living inside that very sentence right now, needing a reason that is big enough to justify what they're giving up. And that could be a relationship, it could be a job, it could be a city, it could be a version of the way that they see themselves. And that is really what we're talking about today. So here's what's actually happening when you try to change something significant and your system starts to pump the brakes. Your brain is a prediction machine. That's its primary job. Not to make you happy, not to help you grow, not to live your best life. Its job is to keep you alive by making the future as predictable as possible. The way it does this is by cataloging everything that's familiar as safe and flagging everything unfamiliar as possible threat. Your brain isn't asking whether your current situation is good for you. That's not what's happening. It's asking whether it's known. Those are 2 completely different questions, and your nervous system is only asking one of those questions. So when you're thinking about leaving something significant, your amygdala, the part of your brain that manages threat responses, can't fully distinguish between I'm doing something new and I'm in danger. It's running 40,000-year-old software in a very modern situation. And the software says the known, that's safe, and the unknown, that's a risk. So stay. This is why just be brave lands absolutely nowhere. You cannot willpower your way past a biological response. And it goes even deeper than comfort. After 17 years in a home, and you might be changing the word home and even the years, after 30 years in a relationship, after 25 years in a job, right? The home isn't just where you live. It's woven into how you even see yourself. Your nervous system has encoded it. Your body knows it without thinking. That level of encoding, that becomes identity. And this is why people stay in situations that they've outgrown. It's not always fear of what's next. It's that they don't know yet who they are without the familiar thing. The job or the relationship or the house or the pattern or whatever it is. That's become part of the answer to the question, who am I? And the brain will protect that identity fiercely, because losing your sense of self registers as a survival threat. So there's a concept that I want to introduce you to. It's called identity foreclosure. It's what happens when we tie so much of our self-concept to a specific role or environment that we can't imagine ourselves outside of it. It's subtle, but it is significant. And there's another piece that I want to put on the table because it explains so much behavior that people judge themselves for. It's called the certainty bias. Research consistently shows that people will choose a bad outcome they can predict over a good outcome they cannot. Known misery over unknown possibility. So it kind of reminds you maybe of misery loves company. Well, applies to oneself also. And it's not because you're broken or they're broken. It's because the brain treats uncertainty as threat and certainty, even painful, certainty as safety. So you have people staying in relationships that are literally making them small and literally making them sick, staying in jobs that are draining them, that are soul-sucking, staying in patterns they literally can't stand. And from the outside, it looks like that's a choice, but it's a nervous system doing threat assessment and choosing the risk it already knows. This is why get comfortable with uncertainty is advice that sounds good and lands nowhere. You need a different strategy entirely. So, what actually works? Here's what you'll probably rarely hear, but is so important to know. The way to shift the system is not to get comfortable with uncertainty. It's to give your brain a new certainty to organize around, a clear enough vision of what's on the other side that it becomes more neurologically real than what you're leaving. This is not a wish or a hope or a prayer. I'm talking about something specific and embodied that your nervous system can actually begin to treat that as the new familiar or the new normal. This is why vague desires don't actually move people. So I want something better. I want something new. I want a challenge. Like, those are all great, but they're really vague. And there's nothing for the brain to hold on to, but a specific, detailed, felt sense of what your life looks and feels like on the other side. That's something the brain can work toward because it has a destination to predict. You're not eliminating the fear of the unknown. You're making the vision of what's next so real that the brain starts treating it like home before you've left the old one. And here's something else that's really important. Small changes are not small. And it's important that I say this because I think it's one of the most important things that I can actually offer you today. When people think about changing their life, They're often waiting for a big moment, a big event, the dramatic overhaul, like this lightning bolt, the version of change that looks like a movie scene where everything shifts all at once and you wake up a different person in a different life. And yeah, those moments do happen. I've seen them. I've lived a version of that. But for the majority of the change that we make, and for the majority of people, that's not how a changed life actually gets built. It gets built in the small, continuous shifts that happen one at a time and compound over months and years into something unrecognizable from where you actually even started. Here's why that matters neurologically. Every time you make a small change and sustain it, your brain lays down a new neural pathway. Every time you repeat it, that pathway gets stronger. You're not just doing something different. You're literally rewiring how your brain is organized. You're giving your nervous system new evidence about who you are. And this is where identity comes in, because with each sustained shift, something quiet starts to happen. You stop being the person who's trying to change, and you start being the person who has changed. You become someone who does this thing now. But yeah, I just do that. I don't even think about it. It's just something that I do. This is just who I am. And that is not a small thing. That's actually the whole thing. That is the whole thing. The big overhaul gets all the attention. But the person who decides to go to bed 30 minutes earlier and then actually does it, the person who stops one conversation pattern that they've had for years, the person who says something honest when they used to go quiet, those are significant changes too. And your brain registers every single one of them as evidence that you are someone who does things differently now. So don't wait for the earthquake when you have the ability to shift the ground beneath you right now in a way that actually sticks. Are you really leaving anything behind? This is a question that I've been sitting with. This feeling that leaving means leaving something behind, and I want to question it. Here's what the neuroscience tells us. Memories are not stored in places. They're stored in you, in your neural networks, in your body. The house, the relationship, the chapter, those are retrievable cues. They help you access the memory, but they don't actually hold it. You do. So the house doesn't hold the memories. I hold the memories. You can close your eyes in a completely different place and find every moment that mattered. The place is just a door. I'm a room. So no, you're not leaving your memories behind. You're changing the door. But I'm not going to skip past the real loss because that would be unfair and dishonest. There is something being left. Not the memories you made. The future you imagined making there. The someday I'll do this here that won't ever happen. That unlived version of a life in that specific container. That grief is real and it deserves to be acknowledged. If you try to rush past it with, well, I take it all with me, right? Your body knows something is being glossed over and it won't fully trust the leap. And that's why it's really important to acknowledge the loss. The honest version is both. You carry everything that happened and you release everything that wasn't ever going to happen in the future. Those aren't actually opposites. Grief doesn't mean you're making the wrong decision. Sometimes grief means you loved something really, really well. So how do you know you've outgrown something? And this is the question underneath all of this. I want to give you real indicators, something that you can really look for within yourself, not just surface things. So here we go. Your imagination has already left. When you picture your life, where does it happen? If your mental images of your future self are consistently somewhere else in a different context, doing something different, your brain has already started building a new map. Your imagination is not being pessimistic. Your imagination is actually being honest. You're staying for the reason of staying, not because being there is actively feeding you, because leaving feels like it's too much. There's a difference between choosing to stay and defaulting to stay. One is agency, one is avoidance. The comfort has become a ceiling. So this is something to look for, where comfort has become a ceiling. A healthy environment grounds you. It gives you a base to expand and grow from. When familiar starts feeling more like a lid, like you're being shoved down into the foundation, and this is often how people feel when they feel like they're being made to live in a smaller version of themselves. When you're editing yourself down, playing smaller, circling the same spot all the time, that's the container's job telling you you're done here. So look for that feeling, notice that feeling. Here's another indicator. You're explaining it to yourself. You catch yourself building a case for why you're still there. Healthy belonging, it doesn't require a case. When the justification engine turns on, pay attention to what it's defending against. Really, really important. And another thing to look for. Novelty has to come from the outside. You're looking everywhere but the thing itself for aliveness. That's not a problem with you. That's information about the fit, how you're fitting in your life. So, how do we distinguish between outgrowing versus escaping? So one distinction I want to make before we close, because it matters for how you move into what's next. There's a difference between outgrowing something and escaping something. Outgrowing means that the container, it did its job. You were there, you lived, you learned, you ached, you celebrated. It was a full-bodied experience. And now you've expanded past it. There's gratitude in that. You're not running from it. You could point to what it gave you. My house gave me 17 years. It held my family. It was exactly what I needed. And I'm bigger than it now. Escaping means you're running from something that's unresolved, and the new thing is just distance wearing a disguise. Same nervous system, new address. Escapers carry the old chapter into the new one without even realizing it. And I see this oftentimes in working with couples, and I really encourage people, whether you stay together or not, doing relational work together is so profoundly important, because if you don't want to repeat what happened, the next person that you're with, or the next place you go, or the next job you have, then you've got to really stay with where you are to unpack it to a point where you can understand what it was all about. The tell for me, when I had the thought, I'd stay if it were by the water. I'm not leaving because this house failed in any way. I'm leaving because I'm ready for what's next. That's outgrowing. I straddled the line of selling this house for several years because the way that I saw myself, what I was ready for, my own capacity, wasn't there yet. So when you grow yourself, when you are outgrowing something, it changes how you walk into what comes next. So back to my friend, the therapist, where we started. When he was feeling that suffocating sense of staying too long in the pain, was actually his nervous system telling him something true. That there's a point where going back stops serving the person and it starts serving the process. And that's the moment the work has to change. The brain does not change by excavating the past indefinitely. It changes when it has something new to move toward. A new prediction, a new identity, a new certainty that it can hold. And it doesn't have to come all at once. It comes in the small things that you repeat until they become who you are and who you be and what you do, until you stop trying to be different and you just are. You are not broken because change feels hard. You're wired for survival in a body that is trying to live. Those are different jobs. And the most important thing that you can do is stop giving your brain the survival instructions when what you actually need are the living instructions. I don't know what my next home looks like. And that used to feel like a reason to wait. Now it feels like the whole point. So, take a moment today, assess where you are, assess how long you've been digging into the past, and start to notice the messages that you yourself are sending, your inner being, your higher self, your sage wisdom, your sage wise self begins to send you messages about it feels like enough. And it's time to start to point instead of toward the past, toward the future. And that is one of the biggest significant differences between therapy and coaching. So notice that within yourself. And then the next step is to honor it and take action. And that is how you live a changed life. Thank you for being here. And I will see you in the next episode. If something in today's episode resonated with you, you'll find a link in the show notes to book a free consultation call. Or you can visit ilyse.com to explore my programs and free resources. Nothing changes until you do. And when you do, everything does. This is a changed life. Not all at once, but for good.